have days of mourning, have the warning. They've changed. They've changed things from what the plan is. So good morning. Welcome to class. So we've been studying the New Testament environment. What goes on in the New Testament around where they're at, trying to understand the customs and the times and the Romans and the Jews and the religion and we've been studying holidays for more holidays than we get holidays. So, so we're gonna do that. I got one, and then Chuck's gonna do another one later, next week. Feast of Tabernacles or Feast of Booths is what we're gonna look at today. Anybody want to take a stab at it? Teach class in 60 seconds. What do you know about the Feast of Tabernacles? Feast of Booths. Wanda said something? Feast of the Ingathering? How about this one? The Feast. It's also called The Feast, which is kind of different. But when you look at that, and it's like I saw several things, it's called The Feast, and when you look at around it, it's this feast. So just shorten it. So Chuck's got his calendar he came up with. I'm not going to change his calendar because it just is what it is. So Nisan's the first month of the Jewish calendar. And it goes Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tishri. Tishri is where we're going to look at right now. So the Feast of Tabernacles, Feast of Booths is going to be in the month of Tishri, 7th month. That corresponds to about September, October. The Jewish calendar is set by the moon. And I think it starts with, is it the first new moon after the first day of spring, after the equinox? Or something like that, isn't it? I think it sets with the equinox, but I won't swear to that. It's not in the equinox. Yeah, it is. Yeah, but shifting according to our calendar, because our calendar doesn't go on the seasons and stuff. So, but it's based on the moon. I know that much. So, yeah, yeah, their months are based on that. Like I said, 28, 29 day moon cycle. It's constant, so they kind of. Yeah. Ours is not constant. It just shifts all. That's why it shifts around, but theirs doesn't. And because there's like 28 and a half days, you'll find that new moon or the full moon don't always happen on the same day of the month each time. It shifts a little bit accordingly. Yeah, Adar is the one where they have 2 Adars. Oh, okay, 2 Adars. That's how they resync it. They resync it with an extra. Yeah. Every 4th year, and they got a 13th month. Got it. Okay. There you go. You want to get into a rabbit hole? Chase the Jewish calendar. Chase that thing. So we're on the Feast of Tabernacles, and the Feast of Tabernacles is down there. Let me say September, October is where it's going to be. So as we've looked at all these different feasts, some of these feasts are ordained by God. We see the Passover. Passover, Feast of First Fruits, and the Feast of Tabernacle. Feast of Weeks, yeah, which is also the Feast of Weeks. Those are all ordained. I think the 3 that they have to keep are Passover. Purim's not. Rosh Hashanah is not. Feast of Lights is not. I think there's one place there's 3, and some places there's 4. And the 4th would be the Day of Atonement. No. Pentecost and Feast of Weeks are together. Day of Atonement is 5 days before the Feast of Tabernacle, if I remember right. Let's see if I got that verse. But Chuck did the Day of Atonement last week. So we're going to go back to the Old Testament. That's where we're going to start. Deuteronomy 16 through 17. 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before the Lord your God at the place that he shall choose. At the feast of unleavened bread, at the feast of weeks, and the feast of booths. There's our answer. They shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed. Every man shall give it as he is able, according to the blessing of the Lord your God that he has given you. So how often is the Feast of Booths, Feast of Tabernacles? How often? No, once a year, but it's every year. There's 2 other festivals that make it 3 that way, but it's every year. So they skip a year, every 10th year, when it feels good, when there's a good harvest. No, it's every year. Where will the Feast of Booths take place? According to this verse 16, where does it take place? At the place he will choose. Wherever he wants it to be. Wherever God wants this festival to take place, that's what he's going to take. So it happened at McDonald's, Mark? No, he didn't choose McDonald's, did he? No. It doesn't happen here either. So where is the place that God chose? The temple. That's where God was. So the temple is where the festivals take place. They're in Jerusalem. So who's supposed to attend? Who's supposed to come to the festival? The carnies, the food trucks. Who else? All the males. Yeah, it says all the males, so it's all the Jews. At the time of Deuteronomy, everybody was together. It was one nation. But as, temple, they didn't have the temple yet in Deuteronomy. But it's, I guess that's really where you get the tabernacle. So where God chooses, the tabernacle goes, that's where it was. Once they got the temple, that's where it would be. And all the males. Susan?
So I have a question.
Okay.
You can answer it. So we often use the phrase, that is where God dwells. Does that mean that's the only place that he dwells?
I could not expect.
Because I think people give you that scripture and say that, so he really isn't there all the time. He just showed up on those occasions that were only place he was. So how do you address that question?
I got a section here from Nehemiah. When they bring the Ark of the Covenant in to dedicate the new temple. So if he only dwelled with the Ark of the Covenant, then they put him away for 70 years or whatever. They put him away for a long time. So where is God? Did he not take care of his people when they're in captivity? Did he not? That can't be the case in that case, And what happens when the temple's gone? When the Ark's gone? The Ark disappears. Does God disappear? Yeah, in Babylon.
I've just had a person recently ask me that.
That's a fair question.
It's a very fair question because they're a person who questions the Bible, and it's one of those things that you could bring up if you're looking, throw darts at it. And I guess my feeling is that was the time he was there for special. They guaranteed to be there for him to talk with him one-on-one, not that he wasn't.
Right.
He was doing other, he was there, but he was there for a purpose.
He was there for a purpose.
Guarantee them that he was there for that purpose.
Yeah.
And that's where he talks about, that's where he's dwelling for them to do these things. I don't know if I could find you a scripture and verse that actually said that.
That makes sense. I mean, he's in the holiest of holies to receive the blood that one day a year. He's guaranteed to be there. And I don't know. Is there a qualifier of that? Like, I don't know. Does it say it's God or does it say like it does with the Spirit? I don't know. But yeah.
The thing is after Christ died, the need for that stopped.
Yeah.
We approach him for our sins. Our sins are forgiven, and the whole purpose of all of this relates back to actually focus back on Jesus and what
The world has questions, and they like good answers. And that's, there's two kinds of us. Those who grew up in the church and you hear it or take it, or maybe you don't hear it, but you've built enough belief that you don't worry about it. And there's some of us that came from the outside that I came with 1,001 questions. Prove to me that the Word of God is spoken by God and authoritative. Just because He says it, there's one verse in there, so you can't say this is right because you said it's right. But it takes a little time to understand. No, it is. That's a good question, though. I agree with that. Clyde? God is everywhere. Right. Yeah. God says to be there at this time, be there. Like you said, first day of the week, to worship, to fellowship, to break bread. He specified that. This is where you'll find Him here. You will find Him here. I'm not going to say you won't find Him. I will be honest. I've caught more fish on Sunday morning than any other time of the week. So He's got to be there too. So all the males, and like we talked about the diaspora, as the Jews are spread, what's the word I'm looking for? When people become Jews. Anyways, lost that word today. The Gentiles become Jews. Proselytize, that's the word I'm looking for. They would still be expected to come. And I think the word is, as you're able. So, how far away. And I think, I'm thinking the Mishnah or something points out it's within so far. I think they've given guidance that way. Not God's guidance, but their guidance. 30 miles or something, somewhere where you can make it a day's journey or 3 days journey or something like that. Anyways, all the males are supposed to attend these 3 festivals each year. Do you bring anything? It's the question every time you go to somebody's house or party, isn't it? Should I bring anything? What do you bring? It doesn't fully say, does it? It just says, don't come empty-handed. And every man shall give as he is able. But you're right, it gets more specific somewhere else. So don't come empty-handed. Some of the commentaries warn, the warnings they have that go to Christianity based on some of this kind of thing is the same way. Take that warning too. Don't, when you come to worship God, don't come empty-handed. Make ahead of time, make that a dedication to not come empty-handed. Deuteronomy 16:13 through 15. We're going to back up a few verses. You shall keep the Feast of Booths 7 days when you have gathered in the produce from your threshing floor and your winepress. You shall rejoice in your feast, you and your son and your daughter, your male servant, your female servant, the Levite, the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow who are within your towns. For 7 days you shall keep the feast of the Lord your God at the place the Lord will choose, because the Lord your God will bless you in all your produce and in all the work of your hands, so that you will be altogether joyful. How long is the Feast of Booths? Oh, Wanda had an answer? She answered so softly. Assigned seat for this Wanda up here. Just move that microphone back there and pick it up a little easier. A week, 7 days. 7 days. And later you'll see there's actually an 8th day. But it's not, you don't know if it's really part of the festival or if it's just a follow-up, but it's kind of an 8th day there too. What time of year does the Feast of Booths take place? After the harvest. When you've gathered in the produce from your threshing floor and your wine press. After you're done with that, That's when it happens. It gives a day and a month is later, but that's when it happens. It's after the harvest. Yeah. Not too much growing November, October, November timeframe. Yeah, pretty much all the summer stuff is done. Yeah, in the northern hemisphere. Yeah, just you get your winter crops and stuff, but by and large, that stuff's done. The big stuff, the colorful stuff. How about that? Why do you think this is also called the Festival of Ingathering? There's a unique name there. How come? This happens after you've gathered in all your produce. So it's the Festival of the Ingathering. So what should be the overall feeling of this feast? Verse 14 says, you shall rejoice in your feast. And then at the last, it says that you will be altogether joyful. It includes everybody. Yeah, I know I got that on a question. Is it right there? Yeah, I'll give it to you now. It includes everybody. So the males are all supposed to go to the feast, the festival, but it says to celebrate, to rejoice with your son and your daughter and your male servant and female servant, the Levite, the sojourner, the fatherless, the widow who are within your town. Do you take everybody with you and leave the towns empty? Or do they celebrate that you've gone to Jerusalem and they celebrate what God's given them, that God has blessed them bountifully? One day that the males go to Jerusalem? Okay. So, yeah. I think they stay 7 days. Yeah, I think they do. Because they build the little huts and the tabernacles and they live in them and stuff like that. But I can't see that would bring the whole nation together in one spot. But I think the males come and they provide for that to happen back home. Yeah, you'd all be sojourners if you all packed up and went to the temple. The Levites, I mean, even like that, there's a priest or something outside of Jerusalem, even. So it's a little different.
There's only so many positions at the temple.
Yeah.
There were priests stationed in every tribe. They're supposed to designate land and
Okay.
every area for a priest. That's it.
Every tribe has a spot for a priest.
Yes.
Oh, okay. And that's probably, Chuck and I were talking about the synagogues and how those come about, which are not ordained in the Bible, but that probably comes about from that or something similar.
They still had to do the things where they went to the place, but I tried to remember, I had studied that fairly recently. I remember it saying something about it, not all the details.
That's good to know.
Everybody couldn't come all the way.
No.
But they needed to talk to them, they needed something.
There's no interstates, there's no airports.
Yeah,
There's not even McDonald's for everybody to feed.
which is really sad.
It is sad. No Starbucks either. Susan's crying now. All right. So, yeah, everybody's going to come. They're going to rejoice because of the harvest. It says God will bless you in all your produce and all the work of your hands. So that's why they rejoice. God will continue to bless them, and they will all be altogether joyful. When the Jewish people turned away from this central admonition to rejoice and adopted instead all kinds of fasts and days of mourning, they made the most fundamental departure from God's will. And that's in the commentary. I typically use Kaufman's commentary. He had these words. You see these festivals and they rejoice. Rejoice in what God provided, and they rejoice in what God did, rejoice in their relationship with God. But the Jews turned to mourning, and they've gotten away from that. What's the most famous? Name one thing in the city of Jerusalem today. Name one place you see on the news or whatever. The Wailing Wall. Again, it's a mourning thing. It's not It's not the rejoicing wall, it's the wailing wall. So they've changed some of this kind of thing. No biblical context.
I think that falls into the New Testament scripture where it says, don't add to or take away. Because if you add so much, you're taking away.
You're right. It says don't add or take away, and you add so much, now you take away the joy, even.
The real meaning of the things
And the real meaning.
supposed to be.
Yeah, why they're there, and yeah, that transforms. And we've looked at this, as Chuck and I have looked at these festivals and stuff. They transform over time, especially after the temple's gone. They transform into something different, and they're celebrating something different. And it's very, very different. I don't know. Rejoice is also a key word in the New Testament. You know, it should be a happy thing. We could look at it as look at sin and look at what sin does, but you could also look at rejoice with the overcoming of that. And that's really, I think, the key to it is that rejoice.
And I think you have to be careful. We have to watch this though too. These things were set aside for a specific thing. And you can get together. I mean, you can say, well, let's get together, and every time we get together, we're having a party, which is great. But eventually you may forget the real reason why you're getting
Yeah,
together. It's not really to party.
Right, don't get you, yeah, you're right.
To do the other, not that it's wrong to have both, but if it takes away from the focus that it should be,
Yeah,
so you have to be cautious.
got to be cautious. You got to have it all. Yeah, I agree with that. Let's move up to Leviticus 23, 33 through 36. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the people of Israel, saying, on the 15th day of the 7th month, and for 7 days is the Feast of Booths to the Lord. On the first day shall be a holy convocation. You shall not do any ordinary work. For 7 days you shall present food offering to the Lord, and on the 8th day you shall hold a holy convocation and present a food offering to the Lord. It is a solemn assembly. You shall not do any ordinary work. So who established the Feast of Booths? God did, right? There you go. God did it. He spoke it to Moses, and God did it. When is it? 15th day of the 7th month, which is Tishri. That's when it happens. And he specifies that. I just wanted you to see that. That day on our calendar this year will be October 6th through 13th. Next year it'll be September 23rd through October 2nd. 2027, that'll be October 15th through 22nd. Just like Easter moves, just moves. All the same calendar. What does the Lord tell his people to do for 7 days? What do you do for 7 days? What do you do on day 8? And what's the difference? Don't do any ordinary work. Present food offerings.
But they really tuned that up in the Mishnah and Gemara, defined what.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah, the Mishnah and Gemara has a definition of what ordinary work is. Yeah. Well, I'm sure of that. So rejoice, we already saw rejoice, so the 7 days would be rejoice. The 8th day says it's a solemn assembly. It's a little different. Why the difference? Any guesses? Crickets? Crickets? I think the first 7 days are about God provides, and the 8th day is He's going to provide, but you're going to go back to the ordinary work. You're going to go back to, it's solemnness to what He's done, what the world will do to us is part of it too. I think what you'll start seeing. So, I don't know. I really don't know why. Just see it. Leviticus 23, 40 through 43, and you shall take on the first day the fruit of splendid trees, branches of palm trees and boughs of leafy trees, willows of the brook, and you shall rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days. All right, what are the fruit of splendid trees other than loquats? My favorite fruit, loquats. All right, anybody, huh? Olives would be there. I think citrus comes from the Mediterranean at least. So would it be around that far? Yeah, they're on the Med, because I think oranges and stuff come from Portugal, Spain type thing. It wouldn't surprise me. What's that? Grapes. I would say grapes. Yeah, because they talked about the wine presses earlier. So, yeah, I would say grapes are part of that. Okay. Doesn't really say. Fruit of splendid trees, anyways. What else are they supposed to bring? Something that you wouldn't consider a fruit necessarily. I don't have anything. Something you might not consider a fruit. Bring in some palm branches. Some bough. What is a bough? I know pine comes in boughs, and they make the wreaths and stuff out of pine boughs. So like a stick with, what's that? Boughs of holly. That would make sense. A stick with leaves on it. Yeah. Willows. Mr. Brent, you know about willow branches, don't you? Probably. Yeah. Go pick. He was talking about that the other day. Huh? He didn't hear me? Yeah. You know about willow branches? I know he was talking about mom saying, go pick your switch. And if you've ever seen a willow branch, they make a switch. So they're going to bring these things. And in verse 14, you shall celebrate it as a feast to the Lord for 7 days in a year. It is a statute forever throughout your generations. You shall celebrate it in the 7th month. You shall dwell in booths for 7 days. All native Israelites shall dwell in booths, that your generations may know that I made the people of Israel dwell in booths, that I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So why were they bringing these palm branches, willow switches, and boughs of leafy trees? It's construction. Yeah, they're going to build. They're going to stay in these little huts. They're going to stay in these little tabernacles. They're going to stay in these little booths for a week. And this is so you can build your hut. This is the pre-VBS project. You bring in all the sticks, tie it all together, and now you get to stay in it. So, what's that? Well, you got to have shade. You know, that's a really good point. Yeah. It gives them it's a better place to stay, but God provided for them, and it says generations may know I made the people of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them out of Egypt. Basically, they had the same thing. You gather up sticks, and builds a little temporary house. Yeah, it gives them shade. It's not necessarily the most oasis of places right there. The one-star hotel? Yeah, the one-star. No amenities. You build it yourself, spend the night, clean up after yourself. And it's to remember that they dwelt in booths when they came out of Egypt. I got 3 verses. Yeah, it's like VBS cookies or the double-strength Kool-Aid. This is how it works. You know, how it gets built. You gotta have it. Psalm 27:5, for he will hide me in his shelter in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of his tent. He will lift me high upon a rock. Psalm 31:20, in the cover of your presence, you hide them from the plots of men. You store them in your shelter from the strife of tongues. Isaiah 4:6, there will be a booth for shade by day from the heat and for a refuge and shelter from the storm and rain. And wanted to hit that exactly. Different versions have different words. I think you see, when we're looking at tabernacles and booths, in these verses here, you see a shelter, you see a tent, you see a cover of his presence, a booth. You see it's the same thing. So what do they represent to God's people?
But those were all temporary things, not permanent.
They're temporary,
We have something permanent.
but they're also protection. I mean that's what when you look at these Psalms and Isaiah, it's not necessarily talking about that little hut, but more the protection of God. Isaiah is really probably more real. The other ones are more talking about God sheltering them, God covering them, God providing. I think that's where it's really going. So that's what it should represent, that God provides for us and God takes care of us, especially like you said, with the 40 years when they wandered. Although he was upset and made them wander, he took care of them every single day. 1 Kings 8, 1 through 5. Then Solomon assembled, we're going to get into not so much about the Feast of Booths, but where else it appears in the Bible. Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes, the leaders of the fathers' houses of the people of Israel, before King Solomon in Jerusalem, to bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of the city of David, which is Zion. And all the men of Israel assembled to King Solomon at the feast in the month Ethanim, which is the 7th month. What do we call the 7th month? Tishri. Good. Here it's Ethanim. My understanding is Ethanim is an older word for that month than Tishri. So, and you'll see that in the Bible a lot of times. They have old names and older names, and so Ethanim, which is the 7th month. And all the elders of Israel came, and the priests took up the ark, and they brought up the ark of the Lord, the tent of meeting, and all the holy vessels that were in the tent. The priests and the Levites brought them up, and King Solomon and all the congregation of Israel, who had assembled before them, were with him before the ark, sacrificing so many sheep and oxen that they could not be counted or numbered. So this is the dedication of Solomon's temple. And it happens at the same time as the feast. Where is that verse? I'm looking for it. Oh, there it is. Verse 2. All the men of Israel assembled to King Solomon at the feast in the month of the 7th month. And so here it just says the feast, but it's the Feast of Booths, it's the Feast of Tabernacles. It had been that same time. The temple was finished almost a year earlier. It was finished 11 months before this, but they're just dedicating it at this time. It was delayed the dedication to coincide with the rejoicing of the Festival of Tabernacles. According to the commentaries I read, that seems to be it. There's some people that look at it that he dedicated the temple before it was finished, but coordinated at the same time. Why would you do that? Why coordinate the dedication of the temple with the Feast of Booths? The temple is the house of tabernacle, yeah. Yeah, the tabernacle now has a home. Yeah, it makes sense. I'll give you that. Even like we talk about God's home, the top of the ark. Well, it's not all God all the time. It's just the ark itself now has a home, you know. So yeah, I think it goes along with the same thing. So, okay. Nehemiah 8, 14 through 18. And they found it written in the law that the Lord had commanded by Moses the people of Israel should dwell in booths during the feast of the 7th month, that they should proclaim it and publish it in all their towns and in Jerusalem. Go out to the hills and bring branches of olive, wild olive, myrtle, palm, and other leafy trees to make booths, as it is written. So people went out and brought them and made booths for themselves, each on his roof and in their courts and in the courts of the house of God and in the square of the water gate and the square of the gate of Ephraim. And all the assembly of those who had returned from the captivity made booths and lived in booths. For from the days of Jeshua, the son of Nun, that's also Joshua, I believe, to that day the people of Israel had not done so. And there was great rejoicing, very great rejoicing. And day by day, from the day of the last day, he read from the book of the law of God. They kept the feast of 7 days, and on the 8th day there was a solemn assembly according to the rule. That is not Joshua, where it says Jeshua, because Joshua was the son of Nun, but just a different one. Anyways, through the Babylonian captivity, they didn't do this. So it had been a long time since they'd done it, 70 years. And they came back together and they did this. It, you're probably right. Didn't do it through judges. That wouldn't surprise me either. There's a number. Because basically, at this point, they rediscovered God's Word. They hadn't been reading it. They hadn't been doing anything with it for at least 70 years. But like I said, probably through Judges 2. I don't know if there's a date. They stopped worshiping. They stopped doing that kind of thing. And Ezra stands up and reads the Torah, reads the first 5 books out in front of, reads that to the assembly of God's people as they come back to Israel. And if it's been 70 years since they've read that, 70 years since they worshiped, everything's going to be new, right? If we stop today, put a lock on this door, we just decide it's not working out anymore, how long, and you go 70 years. That's your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids. In 70 years, how many of us are going to be here to open the door? How many of us are going to be here to remember how things were done, how the singing went, how we used the Word of God, the legitimacy of the Word of God, the Lord's Supper, the offering, the code to the door? Who remembers that? There would definitely not be a building. It would be covered in vines and gone. The bricks would be taken away. But the worship itself would be forgotten. And that's really what's happened here. So what's the feeling among God's people? They're coming back to the promised land. A promise God said. It would be 70 years. They come back. What's the feeling of the people that you see here? Rejoice. They're joyful, right? 70 years did what it was supposed to do. Like you say, through the time of Judges, everybody did what was right in their own mind, what was right in their own hearts. They got away from God. In 70 years, all of a sudden they are very interested. They are very motivated. Like that, they go to the hills and they get every stick they can find. They come back and they build these little booths. And it says on the roofs and the courts of the house of God and the square of the water gate and the square of the gate of Ephraim, it's like Woodstock. They built this stuff everywhere. And they're there. And they are eager to learn, eager to worship. You're right, 70 years did what it was supposed to do. Josephus, the historian, would later refer to the Feast of Tabernacles as the holiest and greatest of Hebrew feasts. So, for what it is. That's what is ordained in the Bible. I'm going to show you some things that have been added to it later, not ordained by God, not the biblical model, but later they add to the festival an offering of water drawn from the pool of Siloam. I've also seen it, and they carry this from the pool of Siloam into Jerusalem, wherever. That comes from John 7. They base that apparently on John 7, 37 through 39. On the last day of the feast, great day, Jesus stood up and cried out, "If anyone thirsts, let him come and drink. Whoever believes me," as the scripture said, "out of his heart will flow rivers of living water." This he said about the Spirit, whom he believed in him were to receive, for as yet the Spirit had not been given because Jesus was not yet glorified. I'm assuming that people added this. Like I said, it's not God's added. I'm assuming that people did this because of the living water. As you wandered for 40 years, God provided water then. This is an addition to that. They also added huge menorahs in the court of women, and that probably is based on John 8:12 when Jesus says, "I am the light of the world." So they got light and water that they add. They don't look at it as Jesus, but they're adding. They've looked at it as God's promise, or God's prophecy, and they've added it to that. But I think that's why they've added some. There's a whole lot of other stuff that's been added. The water and the pillar of light provided during the wilderness wandering when the people dwelt in the tabernacles was temporary, in contrast to the continuing water and light claimed by Jesus during this feast, which commemorated that wandering period. And that comes out of Holman, Holman's Bible Dictionary. I'm going to leave it with Zechariah. Is this the last one I got? Yeah, it's the last one. Zechariah 14, 16 through 21. This is ecclesiastical. This is wording that looks at the end of times, and it's not to be taken literally. It's to be taken apocalyptically. Zechariah 14:16 through 21, that everyone who survives of all nations that have come against Jerusalem shall go up year after year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Booths. And if any of the families of the earth do not go up to Jerusalem to worship the King, Lord of hosts, there will be no rain on them. If the family of Egypt does not go up and present themselves, then on them there will be no rain. There will be the plague with which the Lord afflicts the nations that do not go up to keep the Feast of Booths. This will be a punishment to Egypt and a punishment to all nations that do not go up to keep the Feast of Booths. And on that day shall be inscribed on the bells of the horses, holy to the Lord. And the pots in the house of the Lord shall be as the bowls before the altar. Every pot in Jerusalem and Judah shall be holy to the Lord of hosts, so that all who sacrifice may come and take of them and boil the meat of the sacrifice in them. There shall no longer be a traitor in the house of the Lord of hosts on that day. So it's metaphorical and simply means that all the nations of earth will yield to harvest of souls, yield their harvest of souls to Jehovah. Except Jesus is really the key. And dutifully observe the teachings and ordinances applicable. So that's about the best I get. That's Kaufman's words, but same thing to me. Chuck? He brought us out of the desert, yeah. Yeah, and this is the harvest of souls as we go home. As we go home to a world that's not, God's provided for us each day, and we'll go home to a world that He's provided us a way there too. So anyway, I'll leave it with that. So that's the Festival of Booths, the Festival of Tabernacles, the Feast of the Ingathering, the Feast, different names. I think Chuck's gonna do Hanukkah next week, if he wants to. But I think he will. So thanks for joining us. Sing the one.